Okay, so before I get started on this video and I show you guys what I recorded literally like over a month ago, I want to apologize for the delay in the videos for this book, Shattered Silence by Melissa G. Moore. I really just want to get it done and over with. I've had some interesting insights over the past couple of months. I've also been dealing with my own personal stuff going on. But we are back, guys, and we're gonna finish this. This is gonna be the last book for a few months with the Trippy Book Club. We may start reading again in a few months. I'm gonna evaluate after summer, but my life is just so busy right now, especially with the podcast. But thank you guys so much for being patient, and let's get this finished so we can do a deep dive not only on Melissa G. Moore, but also the victims of her father, Keith Jesperson. And I have gotten messaged from a couple of interesting people in Melissa G. Moore's life that have confirmed to me a lot of what we all believe about Melissa G. Moore's involvement with Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and it is confirmed to be true. So stay tuned for that. Be sure you guys are subscribed here, and you guys go follow my TikTok account as well. But let's get back to it, guys. Here is the next 3 chapters of Melissa G. Moore's Shattered Silence. Everyone, welcome back to my reading of Shattered Silence by Melissa G. Moore, the untold story of a serial killer's daughter. And we are back to get through another 3 more chapters or 4 more chapters, depending on how I feel. I recorded my podcast yesterday, and I noticed that I was struggling to pronounce words. So let's see how today goes, okay, guys? We're just gonna get to it. So again, we are on chapter 33. If you guys haven't read the other chapters, I encourage you to go in this playlist and check them out. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Appreciate you. So we're on chapter 33, Bloody Sunday. From the time of his arrest, my dad seemed determined to haunt everyone, including us, with his callous behavior towards his victims and with details of crimes he had committed. During his many letter-writing campaigns to reporters and website authors, he sometimes referred to his victims as piles of garbage, quote-unquote. Apparently, he had been learning about the legal system from the inside, and he was doing everything he could to discredit his confessions, to mislead prosecutors, and to avoid the death penalty. While I could understand survival techniques, some things that my father wrote were so twisted it made me sick. When I heard that he had offered a self-start serial killer kit, at first I was confused, but only because I wasn't familiar with websites and I didn't understand the implications. Once I read the words he had published, however, I was beside myself with horror. I always knew that my father had a bizarre sense of humor, but when I read Julie's name included in the description, that he could write something so cold and callous about the woman he had told me he wanted to build a life with, it floored me. Despite my father's generous qualities, he absolutely lacked boundaries and he lacked compassion. I wasn't aware of everything that my father had been through as a child, but he and I had once commiserated on how difficult it could be to fit into society. Somehow, along the way, on a deep level, he had forgotten what it was like to be the one who was hurt. He had become desensitized and beyond feeling. He felt an intense amount of shame and embarrassment about my father's behavior and the media circus he was creating with the press, because we lived far enough away from Yakima, Portland, and most of Dad's stomping grounds. Not too many people knew that he was my father. After the things I had been seeing and reading about, I began to have an intense fear of being connected with him. Jason and Carrie were experiencing some of the same feelings. So now we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of the fact that she's facing that her dad is a serial killer and he did do this. Now, I want you guys to take this whole entire book with a grain of salt. Just a tiny little grain, because I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be posting on my subscriber only and membership only side on my social media accounts. Somebody from Melissa Moore's past reached out to me recently, and I was able to vet them, and basically, you know, if you guys don't know what vetting is, it's basically making sure that the person is who they say they are. And the person has not yet read this book. I advised her that I was reading it on my YouTube, and if that was more comfortable for her to read, she could. But she said she just hasn't brought herself to do it, but she has watched a lot of her shows, including Happy Face, which is now on Paramount Plus. And she says she can attribute that whole entire show is basically fictionalized. Like, there's nothing true in that show other than her and her dad's names, literally. But there is some interesting aspects that I got from her that I'm going to be posting about, and it just puts in perspective of what she's lied about, or what she, to her memory, remembers about, and how it's so convenient that she remembers certain things but not other things, and other people remember it. You know what I mean? So take every single thing in this book with a grain of salt, similar to how the Gypsy Rose Blanchard book was, because I do think that there's exaggerations and there's stuff going on in this book that aren't necessarily factual or true. I think she's just trying to make a book. Again, this book could have been literally that much. Like, she could have cut out at least half of it. There's chapters that are completely unnecessary, in my opinion. People like to compliment one another on positive family traits, like father like son, for example. Then there are ones that can be construed negatively, such as the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Every time I heard someone talk about family traits, I began to experience sheer panic. I didn't want to be compared to my father or my mother. I avoided any questions like, who is your father? Or, so what does your dad do for a living? I certainly wasn't going to mention self-starter kits for serial murders. I longed for the father that I had once been proud of, becoming more and more introverted every day. I worried that I might end up like some people I had seen who had become so afraid of others, alone, reclusive, shut away from the world. Worse than that, however, was the responsibility I took for my father's actions. My father did not feel any regret, remorse, compassion, or shame for what he had done. He didn't take any emotional accountability. He had no conscience. It was a big joke to him. He was my father. He had committed these horrible, heinous crimes. Unconsciously, I took on this responsibility that he refused to take on. As the oldest in the family, I felt that if he wouldn't bear the shame and remorse, someone had to. Without realizing it, I took the blame. Okay. I don't want to be like my father, but she also still throws in her mother into the mix. Again, I go back to, and God, guys, I need to post this for you. I go back to the Monsters in the Family her episode with her dad, and talking to like two victims, which I think they're even the same victim. There's maybe like I think it's a son and then a mother of a victim. So 2 out of 7 people that her father, Keith Jesperson, killed. And I just go back to that episode every time she does like a backhanded remark to her mother. And this goes into the fact too that, like, I get that her mother and her may have rekindled a relationship, or there may have been some therapy or sorries or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, you're putting your mom on the same pedestal you're putting your dad, who is a serial killer. Like, yes, your mom made mistakes. Yes, your mom is you know, in an abusive relationship and this, that, and the other. But what did she ever do to you? On the other hand, you're praising your father and wanting to have this father figure and yearning for it, when he literally traumatized you your whole childhood and was a serial killer, murdered women. Like, I don't know why she puts her mom and dad on the same pedestal. It's kind of astounding to me. In August of 1995, I chose to go to Meade High School. I was sick of busing all the way to Shadow, and I was firm in my resolve to have nothing to do with Sean. Despite my Despite my nervousness, my first day at Mead was wonderful. The pressure I had put on myself the previous year to wake up at 5 a.m. was gone. I slept in to a normal time and caught the bus like everyone else in the neighborhood. My classes were easy. My classes were easy to find, people were friendly, and I felt my life improving. I suddenly didn't care that I was 16 and without a car or driver's license yet. On the bus ride home, I met a girl who was new to the area. Her name was Tanya, and she had beautiful eyes and lovely brown hair. Naturally willowy and lithe, her most appealing feature was an open, engaging smile. We sat next to each other and struck up an instant friendship. Tanya asked me if I would like to try some of her lip gloss. I looked at her necklace and saw a dozen colorful tubes of flavored lip gloss hanging around her neck. I smiled. A girl after my own heart. Tanya had almost all the flavors available to collect, and she had more at home. The next day, we sat together on the way to school, chatting like we had been lifelong friends. We were disappointed to find out we didn't have many of the same classes, but we didn't let that get in our way. Tanya began inviting me to her house quite often, and we found we had enough in common to form a tight friendship and enough divergent interests to keep it intriguing. I never invited Tanya to my house, and she never asked to see it. There was a lot of unspoken things between us, and she seemed to honor that space inside me. Her home life had been rough in a different way, and so we felt a connection in our friendship. Every day, I grew to trust her more and more. Tanya grounded me. I finally felt back in my own body, back in reality, and ready to move forward with my life. From time to time, I would tell Tanya something that was happening with me. She never broke any of her promises or any of the trust I had in her. She kept my secrets safe. Tanya's mother had recently gone through a divorce. She was suffering from depression, but she made sure she was present for Tanya. She began to be there for me as well, like a second mom. I loved my mother and didn't need a replacement, but Lynn was like the balm that my mother was not in the position to be. Lynn had a safe and secure home. It was around this time that my father started sending me letters. I had not opened up to anyone at the new school about my father, not even Tanya. Within short order, however, I told her, and it felt so good to have someone that I could trust and confide in. She knew I was ashamed of my father, and she didn't pressure me to talk about him. When one of his letters came, though, it was nice to share them with her because I needed to have a sounding board. Sometimes Dad's letters would sound like a normal letter from a father to a daughter. Sometimes they were really weird, and I liked it when Tanya validated what I was feeling without me having to ask her. One day I read a letter to her, and it seemed quite off to me, but in a way I couldn't have put into words. I had grown up with my dad's inappropriate behavior and his lack of boundaries, and I wasn't always sure where they should be. I read the words, "Your mother was never good in bed," and I glanced up to see a strange look on Tanya's face. "I cannot believe your father would tell you this kind of stuff, Mal," she said, her eyes wide with incredulity. She slapped her knees loudly. "That's it. Your father's officially twisted. Hey, wanna go get some ice cream? My mom bought some really yummy stuff yesterday." That's what I loved about her. Tanya could take my peculiar life and make it funny. She created a safe space where we would talk about the things that bothered me and then move on. We didn't have to waste time or energy on melodramatics, pity, or even pretending. She made me feel normal. In the fall of 1995, Tanya and I heard on the news that based on specific information given to authorities by my father, a Nebraska highway patrolman found that what was left of a woman's body. Angela Sabriz was found in the tall grass near the tiny town of Gothenburg, Nebraska, located near the South Platte River. Authorities believe the remains had been decomposing there since January, and a tattoo of Tweety Bird, still visible on one of her ankles was one of the only identifying marks that remained. We found out that Wyoming prosecutors were planning to seek the death penalty. Tanya was there for me as I cried. Cried because your dad's getting a death penalty, or cried because there was yet another victim? I'll put all my bets on because your dad's has the threat of getting the death penalty. My father had ulterior motives as usual. In November of the same year, he waived all his rights and was transferred to Oregon, where he entered a no contest plea before Multnomah County presiding judge Donald H. Lunder for the murder of Tanya Bennett. Judge Launder sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before being eligible for parole. I did not know that this is what my father wanted. Prison time in Oregon meant it would be expensive to extradite him to other states for prosecution, and the clincher, it made potential death penalties in other states less likely. In the meantime, there was still the murder of 23-year-old Lori Ann Pentland. My father had written letters as the happy-faced killer after Pentland's murder, claiming responsibility for the death. He was given another life in prison sentence in Oregon with a 30-year minimum term before parole, and was to serve consecutive sentences. He would never leave prison because if he somehow lived through his first two sentences in Oregon, he would be transferred to Washington State Penitentiary to serve his other life sentence there. All I understood were two things. The first was that my father's sentencing meant that the people who were innocent would finally get out of jail. I wondered about the woman, Pavlinac, who had set herself and her boyfriend up. Would she be safe? Had either of them learned anything in the process? I would never know. The second thing I realized was that as my father was given life sentences in prison, I was sentenced to a life without a father. Gone were the child support payments. Gone were the weekly phone calls, because all calls from prison had to be made collect, and none of us could afford them. I now had a permanent absent father in another state where it was easy to forget he existed. So it made you sad that your dad is in prison. You never have to talk to and have these horrendous conversations with him ever again. And you're realizing that now. Like, what? I don't know. That all just seems wishy-washy to me. And again, a lot of people, especially with the ex-friend I talked to recently of Melissa G. Moore, this whole thing is like, she is wanting her father's crimes to fit her narrative so she can benefit from writing this book, from doing TV shows, from doing all this. And I hope that you guys see that throughout this book as well. I'm not just giving my opinions on this and being just like a heartless, senseless type of person, because the people that know me know I am not like that in any shape or form. But also, I hope that you guys realize that the reason I'm doing this is because her actions are different than what she's put in this book, than what she's put on TV, than who she's helped. Her actions are quite opposite. So that's where all of my judgmental opinions come from. It doesn't come from a place of callous or bullying, okay? Thanksgiving was very hard that year. Part of it was that I didn't like having an abundance of food for only one day and then having to struggle the rest of the year. Also, we didn't feel much like a family lately. Jason and Carrie were always gone, and I couldn't blame them. So was I, as often as I could. That holiday weekend, I spent as much time away from the reminders of what my father had created and that my life was at home. When I was away, I felt more at peace, like life was friendly. Because of the trust Tanya and I had built, I began trusting other people too. Tanya and I had made another friend, Stephanie. She was a junior that year at Meade and had invited me over a few times to her house. I felt it often at Tanya's too, and it was intriguing to me. Stephanie had invited me for a sleepover, and I was grateful for a place to go where I felt so loved and comfortable. I almost I almost felt as at home there as I did at Tanya's house. On Sunday morning, we were having breakfast in the kitchen. It was my favorite place in Stephanie's house because there were always multiple things going on at once. We were cooking breakfast, watching TV, talking about crushes, taking questionnaires out of teen magazines, and having a great time. All of a sudden, I was shocked to see my father's face appear on the screen. It was a national news program, and they were doing an expose on my father, the happy face killer, quote unquote. They reported that on that day, Sunday, November 27th of 1995, after serving more than 4 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit, Laverne Paflanak and John Cisnowski were being released from prison. The entire show was on the original crime, on Palvanak and Cisnowski, and on my father. Fascinated, Stephanie and her mother stopped what they were doing to watch the coverage. I was so embarrassed and humiliated. I thought they knew. I began to tremble. The secrets I kept in the dark hole deep inside me, all the shame and guilt, had been called out by the national news anchor. They were going to ask me about him. They were going to judge me based on my father. Stifling a cry, I ran away down the hall, blinded by the tears, stubbing my toe on a door frame. Not scrubbing, sorry. I hurtled into Stephanie's room and collapsed onto the bed. I wanted to die right there, to sink into the bedclothes and never come out again. Melissa, what is it? What happened? Are you okay? Their tender, worried questions made me cry even harder. I crumbled in the arms, awash in the pain of it. I felt like my worst fears were coming true. It took several minutes for me to calm down and for them to get the story out of me because they really didn't know. Even though our last names were the same, they had no idea that the serial killer they were watching on television was my father. I was so afraid that Stephanie and her mother wouldn't welcome me over to their home anymore. I had only just gotten to know Stephanie, but I really liked her, and her approval meant the world to me. Okay. Once I was calm and they assured me I would always be loved and welcome there, Stephanie and I had a long talk. I told her about my dad from my perspective and how hard the whole year had been. She was baffled as to why I had kept it a secret from her. Stephanie then shared with me a very personal and traumatic experience she and her family had suffered, and we realized that we were able to relate to each other's pain. We were also able to relate to the desire to move beyond it into a better life. From that point on, Stephanie became a very sincere and valued friend to me. We never discussed my father again, but now I had two friends who knew me, knew my past, and knew about my father, and still loved me. The shame never left, but with Stephanie and Tanya beside me, it lessened considerably. So that was the end of chapter 33, and we're on chapter 34, A New Home for New Holes. And I'm just going to go ahead and, that's kind of a weird name. I'm just going to start reading because I'm trying to get through this book, guys. We're so close. There's only 41 chapters and we're on 34. So hopefully this will be the next upload, and by next week we'll be completely finished, but just bear with me, guys. We're almost there. So again, this is called chapter 34, A New Home for New Holes. Yeah, I don't agree with the title of this chapter, but okay. The corner lot had weeds that looked frozen and stone hard. It was difficult to picture that contractors would soon be putting in our foundation for the Habitat for Humanity home we were approved for. Oh yeah, I forgot. She was Dee Dee Gypsy Rosing it up before they were. I'd pictured this home for months in my mind, and now I would see what the address would be. As we had driven through the neighborhood, I observed the surrounding homes. I was a little concerned about how we might be received by our neighbors. Most of the homes were tiny and in need of care. Several had fixer-upper cars lined up in the front yard, waiting for repairs that would never come. Tall grass was growing through the spokes of the tires. Discarded trash had blown into the bushes by the sidewalks. On one side of our lot, there were what appeared to be commercial property with a barbed fence wire and a boxy building. I kept looking for something to bring a hint of welcome, and then I found one. The neighbor across the street owned a small, cute home that appeared new. My mother saw me looking at the home. That's a Habitat for Humanity home, too. It gave me a point of reference on what our home would look like, although my mom explained that hers was just a 2-bedroom and ours would be a 4. That was a relief. The existing Habitat home appeared to be the same size of our Nordine home that had been just 2 rooms, and there were more of us now. I did not relish in the idea of living in such tight quarters again. My mother was staring at the lot, trying to picture our new home. I think country blue would be good color with white trim, although our neighbors will have to agree. Our neighbor has to agree, I asked. We're getting a duplex since the lot is so big, she explained. I was just happy to have a new home regardless of the color it would be. Maybe having a duplex would keep Robert from making a huge ruckus when he was angry. We drove off feeling satisfied that this dream was truly becoming a reality. Now as a family, we were actually united in something. We were united in hope. Every one of us was eager to leave the cramped basement for good. Again, they have a Habitat for Humanity house. I want to address this. So I recently found out that Habitat for Humanity houses are not as uncommon as a lot of people may think. It's literally a program that even you can pay for within time, and you own it for a lesser amount depending on the income you make. So a very interesting fact that I learned over the past week or so. Now, that's not to say that some Habitat for Humanity homes are completely free, or they have to pay the taxes regardless of anything. So they're not technically free. They still have to be doing something, you know what I mean? I think Gypsy's was mainly because, you know, her mom took care of her, she was her caregiver. In turn, it was like, oh well, we'll just gift this to them, you know what I mean? So but just a little bit to think about. The months got warmer, and soon it was the great housewarming day. The staff from Habitat for Humanity and all the volunteers came to congratulate us. When I walked in, I saw a large welcome home Smith family on an easel. I overlooked being classified as a member of the Smith family to feel the clean, stiff carpet under my feet. It was surreal to be standing in a home that just months ago did not exist. Jason, Carrie, Benjamin, and I all ran to claim our rooms. My sister and I would have to share one. Jason got his own, and Benjamin and our new baby half-brother, Christian, got the very back room closest to Mom and Robert's master bedroom. Jason had not lived at home permanently since Robert had thrown him across the yard during the argument. We all hoped this was a new beginning and that Jason would stay with us so we could be a real family again. I don't remember that happening. So he wasn't living in full time with them. So I don't know, maybe I'm just, because it's been so long, I'm forgetting that, but I don't remember that happening, and to just like slide that in there is kind of, I don't know. I could turn the light off and on with a switch instead of a string, and I had a closet for my clothes instead of shoe boxes. I savored that beautiful moment. I gave thanks to the God I was beginning to know, but who I felt that had loved forever. I knew from that moment on that whatever I desired could come to be, if I just believed. My visionary home now in solid form, I felt powerful and in control of my destiny for the first time. That feeling of power and control did not last long, but had inherent lessons in it. It did not take long for Robert to dominate the new home. Within 3 months, he was dictating even the smallest details of how the home was run. Since it was a one-story home, he had a view of the whole house at all times, including a full view of the kitchen. Since all of the bedroom doors faced the living room, while Robert would monitor our movements when we left the bedrooms. Within 3 months, violence in our home had escalated. Mom had stayed home with baby Christian as long as she could, and then she had Carrie or Robert watch him when she went back to work. One evening, Robert brutally hurt my mom when he got mad at me for eating some leftovers. He left while she went to the hospital, and I thought he was leaving permanently. My mom changed the locks and promised he was out of our lives for good. A few days later, however, Robert showed up at our door with new keys my mother had given him. Not long after that, Robert and my brother had an argument in our new house. Jason grabbed a baseball bat ready to swing at Robert if he tried to attack him while he was leaving out the door. My brother was gone again. For the second time, because we didn't know the first time. When my mother came home from work, she discovered that Jason had moved out. She went to Robert to investigate the day's events. Trying to be the peacemaker backfired on her. Robert suddenly snapped and shoved my mother into a new wall. As she got up, I saw the sheetrock crumble where her back had landed. As soon as she was on her 2 feet once more, Robert shoved her again by the open front door. This time she flew backwards on the cement stairs outside and screamed in abject pain as her head hit the cement. She lay there for a minute, and when she got up, I saw that her hand was bleeding, and the back of her head appeared to have split open. I was frozen with fear, not daring to confront Robert, but aching to help my mother. I had seen what happened when anyone tried to protect my mother, and Jason had taken the only baseball bat. After Robert left, I ushered all of the children into the car as Mom slowly drove to the hospital for treatment. That night, we stayed at my grandmother's home. In the morning, my mother filed a police report and obtained a restraining order against Robert. I complained to my mother that I wanted to go back to my own room and did not want to stay another night with Grandma Frances again. She agreed, and little Christian, Jonathan, Carrie, and my mother and I pulled up to the blue house and saw that Robert was gone and that all of our personal things were still there. My mother, fearful that Robert would return, changed the locks on the front door once again. I could sense my mother's fear about sleeping alone in our home. She did not feel confident she could not feel confident she could protect us if Robert were to return. Inside, I knew she was right, but I was not about to let Robert intimidate me away from my new bedroom. I had survived 2 years in a basement to get that bedroom, and I was not going to abandon it that easy. We had the right to the house. It had gotten dark one night, and everyone was starting to get ready for bed. I looked through the dresser drawer and saw that I had only a top to my PJs, and the bottoms were missing somewhere. I shrugged the worry off and decided just to sleep in the top since Robert was not in the house. After saying our goodnights, the house fell silent. I was having a hard time going to sleep with the assault still replaying in my head over and over again. Then I heard a noise in the living room. It sounded like a tapping on the window. Just as I was starting to wonder what that noise was, I heard a banging on the window above my bed. Startled, I jumped off my bed and ran to my mother, who was already up and in the hallway. "What is that noise, Mom?" "It's Robert," she whispered, "but he cannot get in. He'll just try to keep us up by banging on the windows." I did not believe that Robert would be content to simply bang on windows. "Should I call the police?" I asked as the warning came up inside me. "No, he will be all right." The voice of warning sounded again. "Do it anyways." I picked up the white phone on the side table in the living room and dialed 911. An operator answered, and I gave her my name, telling her that my stepfather was trying to break into the house. She had just asked for my address when I heard a large crash. Robert was now standing over the broken front door glaring at me. I screamed. "He broke through the door. Please help me now." "What is your address?" the operator persisted, but Robert had charged at me and pushed me over as he tipped the phone off the cord. He headed to the back of the house. There was nothing more I could do except hope that the police were on their way. When I got up, I witnessed Robert attacking my mother in the hallway. I flew at him, hitting him on the back, but he appeared to not feel a thing as he rampaged against my mother. I was afraid she was going to die, and then I, Carrie, Benjamin, and baby Christian would be next. In mortal fear, I grabbed my half-brothers and my sister, and we ran across the street to a neighbor's house. I banged desperately on the door, but no one would answer. Sirens sounded around the corner, and police cars screamed to a stop surrounding our home. I was standing on the corner in my PJ top and underwear with my 3 siblings, watching as 4 policemen tried to get Robert out of the house. Robert was attacking the officers, and they had to contain him. Once I saw Robert being escorted into the police car in handcuffs, I wanted to run to my mother, but I was deathly afraid of what I might find. Would she still be alive? 4 policemen on Robert, my mother against Robert, all alone. I felt guilty for leaving my mother there while she was being attacked. I felt like I had abandoned her. Carefully, I walked my siblings over to the house, embarrassed to be in just my underwear and PJ top. Inside, an officer was holding my crying mother, rocking her consolingly as her face was beginning to swell beyond recognition. Another officer began to question me. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, his tone compassionate and caring. I nodded and then proceeded to share the story. The officer assured me that Robert would be spending some time in jail for assaulting an officer and my mother, and for violating his restraining order. Robert would also get charged for ripping the phone off the hook while I was on the line with 911. The officers kindly assured my family that we would sleep in peace for a few nights. Before leaving, they took photographs of my mother's injuries. I was amazed that she did not have to go back to the hospital. I eventually learned that she had refused medical care. She was exhausted and just wanted to stay home. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, they can charge you for get charges for ripping the phone off the hook while I was on the line with 911. I'm gonna have to look that up and I'll insert it here, okay guys, because that just sounds a little weird. I don't know. Maybe I just haven't heard it. I don't know. We'll see. Within 3 months, Robert somehow came back into our lives and moved back into our home. Being more fearful now of Robert, I stayed at my friend Tanya's house every chance I could. So he left, came back, left, came back. So I guess those charges for ripping the phone off the wall didn't stick. Not to be, I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that, but I'm just saying. Tanya's house felt safe and more like home than my own house did. Tanya's mother treated me like her own child and welcomed me into her home. I was free to eat her dinners, sleep over any night I needed to. Most nights in the summer, I stayed with Tanya. Over time, we became as close as sisters. Nice. So I'm going to stop there. Again, this book has 41 chapters. And we'll be on chapter 35 next time, Redemption. Like I said, I do want to get through this book fairly quickly. I have a lot of other videos I'm planning on, and then this book will also prelude into a podcast about Melissa G. Moore, more specifically about Keith Jesperson and the victims. Focusing a little bit more on that. Be sure you guys are subscribed or like the podcast wherever you can listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe here. I upload all my podcast episodes here on YouTube, so be sure you're subscribed here if that's your way of listening. But thank you guys so much. I do appreciate it. Like I said, be sure you're subscribed, not only here but over on my TikTok as well. I'm going to be posting some subscriber only content very soon, including some people I talked with that are extremely close to Melissa G. Moore, and have been in her life or are currently still in her life in one way, shape, or form. So I think it would be really cool to share that with you, but only to my subscribers, because yeah, that's just how it's going to be. Anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay positive, stay awesome. Thank you guys for sticking with me, and I apologize for the delay, but we will get through this within the next couple of weeks. I think maybe 2 weeks max we'll have the rest of the chapters, and then we'll get into it a little bit more. But be sure to subscribe, and we'll talk about it next time. Bye guys.